On February 20th, 2026, it was announced that big changes are on the way for Xbox, as longtime leaders Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond will be leaving the company. In their place comes the mysterious Asha Sharma, whose tenure at Xbox has gotten off to a bit of a bizarre start, with mixed messaging and a whole lot of tweeting. Today we'll be talking about Xbox's new look, what we're hearing about the decision, and my personal thoughts on what's coming next for the struggling console brand. It's no secret that Xbox's console line is in a fair bit of trouble, and it's been that way for a few years now. Sales are plummeting, and the direction of the brand seems totally unclear. In times like this, leadership change is to be expected, but so far Xbox has been holding the line. However, the dam finally broke, with a whirlwind of movement hitting the company. First and most notably comes the retirement of Phil Spencer, who has led Xbox since 2014. Phil took over during a similarly tumultuous time for the brand in the year following the disastrous Xbox One reveal and launch. While I didn't always agree with his decision making, it's undeniable he was a positive for Xbox in the immediate years after taking on the role. He was a very personable guy who was great at connecting with his community of players, while also helping implement some very consumer-friendly initiatives such as Game Pass and bringing back backwards compatibility. More recently, though, I've questioned Phil's level of involvement in the decision-making, as Xbox has begun transitioning away from the traditional hardware mindset, focusing more on Xbox Play Anywhere and porting their games to rival platforms. A lot of it seems to directly go against things Phil had pushed for in the past. It seemed to me like a lot of these calls were coming from the people above him, while he had to go out there and promote it with a smile. These decisions put him in a rough spot where he was constantly contradicting himself and the things he had said previously. So I'm not all too surprised he chose to retire and get out of there. The bigger shock came from Sarah Bond's corresponding move, leaving Xbox on the same day. Sarah Bond had been Phil's sidekick and the other forward-facing figure of the brand throughout the 2020s. Many had assumed she would take his place whenever Phil did eventually retire, but that didn't happen, and it would appear she quit after not receiving that expected promotion. There are two key individuals who will be replacing Sarah and Phil. The first is a familiar face, Matt Booty. The former head of Xbox Game Studios has now been promoted to Chief Content Officer and will be working directly with their new CEO, Asha Sharma. Asha is the wild card in this scenario, someone most of us have never heard of prior to this announcement. Her work history shows former high-level tech roles at Instacart and Meta, as well as some marketing work at Microsoft many years ago before leaving. She rejoined Microsoft 2 years ago, and since then, her primary focus has been on the company's AI initiatives, such as Core AI and Microsoft Copilot. Considering that background, it's fairly surprising to see her elevation to a leading role in the video games industry. If her first few days on the job are anything to go off of, I think Microsoft and Asha were aware of that incoming skepticism, and this is where my concerns begin. Asha's first statement as CEO says all the right things. She states a commitment to great games, the return of Xbox and the future of play. She makes bold claims of renewing commitment into Xbox consoles, and she even directly addresses concern of her background in AI. The only problem is, almost all of this directly goes against everything she has said and done in the past, and what Microsoft is currently valuing as a corporation. Maybe I've become too jaded, but unless Asha is planning to completely upheave everything Xbox or Microsoft has done for the last few years, I don't see how any of what she's describing comes to fruition. It felt like an executive throwing out buzzwords that the PR team thinks people will like without any care for how realistic the statements are. A recommitment to Xbox hardware rings hollow when we know their current next-generation console plans will be more reminiscent of a PC. Stating you are anti-AI slop doesn't do much for me when you are previously on the record saying every application will become an AI application. Following this fluffy statement, Asha's next act as Xbox CEO was to head over to Twitter and start interacting with the community. Her interactions here were when my eyebrows really started to raise. Asha sent out a lot of tweets responding to fans and engaging in conversation about what they want to see for the future of Xbox. This immediately felt very strange to me, like they were trying to recreate the vibes of Phil Spencer and the connection he had with gamers. But that's not something something that can be faked or forced. Phil was able to connect in this way because he was genuinely passionate about games and understood the space. Tossing someone like Asha into the flames of Twitter, especially Twitter in 2026, and thinking she could make that same connection was not a great move. Users were quick to accuse her of using AI to form her responses due to some strange wording, such as telling one fan to DM me what's top of mind. In my opinion though, I don't think they would be dumb enough to do that. Perhaps I'm giving them too much credit, but my assumption is this is just a typical, kind of boring business executive being told to go and interact with thousands of rabid Twitter users and being woefully unprepared for that moment. We are in a social media world where everything you say is going to be analyzed and ripped to shreds. I don't know why they would expose her to that immediately. The tweet that caught my eye was her response to a fan that had requested the return of Xbox exclusive games. Asha responded with a simple, "Hear you," but that's kind of a huge statement. Did the new CEO of Xbox really just acknowledge that they should look into bringing back exclusive games and stop giving everything to their main competitor? Unfortunately for anyone hoping for that reality to return, it's simply not going to happen. You can't go from releasing everything on PlayStation 5 to just not a day later. And with how well Xbox games are doing on PlayStation, it would be a massive revenue hit, something they are certainly not looking for right now. Considering Xbox has gotten into trouble for mismessaging and saying too much in the past, it's surprising to see them making the very same mistake again. That "heard you" tweet about exclusives is going to be held over their heads every single time their next inevitable PlayStation 5 port is announced. Why would you put yourself in that position? Have they learned nothing from the last 5 years? After making some promises that seem unlikely to be kept, Asha began getting grilled about her favorite games and was eventually convinced to post her gamertag. A gamertag that fans quickly noticed had basically no activity on it prior to a month ago when she probably started preparing for the role. This sent everyone into a frenzy, but they're focusing on the wrong things. The idea that a gaming executive needs to be an avid player of games is frankly extremely stupid. It is not going to be the case most of the time, and many of the biggest video game companies on earth are run by people who will tell you they don't play games. What's key here is not that they play games, but that they understand them. I do worry about Asha in that regard, as someone casually playing video games for a month is not the same as having a feel for the industry at large. But it's not unheard of to have success without a gaming background, such as Strauss Zelnick, CEO of Take-Two, who has said multiple times he does not play any video games and did not have prior industry experience. His business expertise allows him to lead the company, and he then relies on the trusted people around him to help guide the decisions he may not have the necessary experience to comprehend. It's not impossible that Asha could do the same, but I'm not so sure I trust the people she's going to have around her. I am not the biggest fan of the man she chose to promote, Matt Booty. In 2018, Matt Booty was named president of Xbox Game Studios and has been overseeing their first party ever since. In that time, Xbox's first party has been the weakest aspect of their brand by far. Their top IPs have been completely mismanaged, multiple projects in development have taken years longer than expected, and I could count on one hand the number of truly great games that came under his watch. It wasn't until Xbox bought up half the industry that they found any sort of consistent output. To be fair, Xbox's first party was floundering before he took over, but he's been in the role long enough now that we should have seen some improvement. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that his first party failures are a major reason why they are in the position they're in today. Early flops in the Series X and S generation, like Redfall, or the fumbling of Halo Infinite, or the overhyped Starfield, totally sank them. This was a time when they were still pushing console exclusivity and trying to catch PlayStation. But instead, these being the marquee titles early on was the death blow. Seeing him continuing to climb the ladder is pretty concerning. And if we assume he's the go-to guy for gaming-related decisions, reasons, I don't like Asha's chances here. So while all of this was going down, a bunch of articles started flooding the internet, and one in particular has caught a lot of attention. It comes from Tom Warren at The Verge and focuses on Sarah Bond. In what many feel is a hit piece, the article essentially blames Sarah Bond for everything. You didn't like when they moved away from consoles and focused on Xbox Play Anywhere? Oh yeah, that was her idea. You hated that terrible "This is an Xbox" ad campaign? Don't worry guys, that was all Sarah Bond's doing. The article also claims she was hard to work with and was not well liked. That's something I obviously can't speak on, but I can assure you she was not the only person pushing for these failed initiatives. It's pinning the blame on someone they feel they can scapegoat. They need to distance themselves from the ideas that have plagued them this generation. They aren't going to disrespect Phil on the way out, so why not push it all onto the other, less favorable executive who is leaving us? When you combine reporting like this with Asha's Twitter ramblings of exclusive games or dashboard updates, it's obvious what Microsoft is doing. They are saying all the right things you want to hear while pretending that people leaving were fully to blame. But I really urge you all to be cautious with this. If you honestly think the woman with an AI background, the guy who killed Xbox's first party, and the equally AI-obsessed Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella are going to save Xbox, I truly don't know what to tell you. The co-creator of the original Xbox, Seamus Blackley, had an interview with GamesBeat about the move, and needless to say, he's not thrilled. And I think a lot of what he said echoes how I'm feeling. Blackley feels Asha is there to sunset Xbox and help send it gently into the night. He feels her AI background cannot be ignored and will likely push Xbox in that direction alongside everything else at Microsoft. While some of what he says might sound a tad dramatic, I can't disagree with his overall point. Microsoft hiring someone with an AI background was not an accident. Think back to the Phil Spencer era. As I said earlier, it came in 2014, a time when Xbox needed to win back gamers after the Xbox One fiasco. Hiring a gaming-centric mind showed their commitment to the space and that particular aspect of their business. If we assume that same mindset has been applied to this hiring cycle, what does the choice of someone with zero game industry experience tell you? I understand that for now Asha is saying the right things, but I'm gonna have to see it to believe it. I hope Asha means what she says and brings Xbox back to better times. I hope all of those who have dedicated thousands of dollars, countless hours, and multiple decades to Xbox don't get left in the dust. But I also live in reality. I've watched the Xbox community get jostled around for the last 5 years, being told one thing while something totally different is happening in the background. I've watched them scramble to explain how a company spending billions on acquisition is going to sustain that off of Game Pass subscriptions alone. I've watched them pretend that having a console with no exclusive games is a totally normal and viable business strategy. The Xbox community has spent a lot of time believing in things that simply aren't true. And as much as I hate to say it, it looks like it's happening all over again. I sincerely hope that I'm wrong, but knowing what I know about this industry and seeing what I've seen in the past, I doubt I am. I suppose only time will tell.